Let's first cross live to Washington, D.C., where Donald Trump has been speaking in the Oval Office in the last few minutes about the war in Ukraine in particular. Came after his special envoy for pretty much everything, a bloke called Stephen Witkoff, met with Vladimir Putin of Russia today. And the signs, at least according to Donald Trump, are positive. Simon Marks is here, LBC's Washington correspondent, to tell us more. Simon, very, very good evening to you. What's he been saying?
Well, Ben, he's been at pains in the Oval Office not to put too rosy a tint on the possibility of advancing the cause of peace in Ukraine. But it's clearly been a day of very fast-moving developments since Steve Witkoff, his special envoy, arrived in Moscow this morning, had a face-to-face meeting with Vladimir Putin at the Kremlin that Donald Trump described as highly productive. He wouldn't be drawn on the detail of the meeting, but he did say that he now believes that the way is open for face-to-face conversations between himself, the American president, and the Russian leader. And then the administration is hinting at the possibility of a three-way face-to-face conversation that would add the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky into the mix. And Donald Trump indicated within the last hour at the White House that the first conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin could take place within days or weeks.
Yeah, we're pretty much getting close to it right now, but we're having very serious talks right now about getting out of Ukraine, getting it settled. We haven't determined where, but we had some very good talks with President Putin today. I don't call it a breakthrough. I mean, we've been working on this a long time.
So you could hear that he was being relatively sanguine there. I think it's worth making the point that the last time we sort of heard Donald Trump expressing tremendous impatience towards Russia, he insisted that the Russians had a deadline of this Friday to agree peace with Volodymyr Zelensky, or all sorts of secondary sanctions and possibly additional primary sanctions were going to be imposed on Russia and the countries that trade with it. That all now is being kicked into the long grass again, as President Trump indicates that the way may be open for conversations. He briefed European leaders, including the Prime Minister, told them that he hopes that he might meet Vladimir Putin face-to-face as early as next week. We think it's possible that that meeting might take place in Istanbul, might take place in Riyadh. There are a variety of possible locations being reviewed, but we don't know critical answers to vital questions. Has Donald Trump agreed to talks without preconditions? How is he going to make sure that he doesn't get, as he's put it before, tapped along by the Russian President Vladimir Putin? That's an important question, because we know that the president told the Prime Minister and other European leaders today that they will not be getting a seat around the table. This is going to be him one-on-one with Vladimir Putin, and then one-on-two with Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky. And the Europeans are being completely sidelined by Donald Trump in this process. And there's a reason for that, possibly, which is that if he brings this off, Donald Trump wants this to give him the undisputed claim to the Nobel Peace Prize.
As ever, guiding much of his thinking. The change in rhetoric, Simon, from Trump towards Russia and Putin, quite interesting, I think. I mean, this latest kind of statement in the Oval Office coming after Trump declared Russia an extraordinary threat to the United States. Not the sort of language he's always used about Putin, which has been much warmer in the past. What do you make of that kind of that shift in tone?
I mean, the tone keeps shifting. There have been times when he's basically given Vladimir Putin an entire pass over Ukraine, insisted that Ukraine started the war, berated Volodymyr Zelensky in that infamous Oval Office meeting. There have been times, as there were over the last fortnight, when he'd sounded impatient with Vladimir Putin, indicated that his willingness to continue tolerating the Russian leader was expiring. We never quite get to the point of learning what Donald Trump is going to do about Vladimir Putin. And this, while it is a possibly dramatic new opening in the quest for peace in Ukraine, is also possibly an opening for Vladimir Putin to continue playing Donald Trump, and he's been playing him like a violin for many months, with no guarantees whatsoever of success. Remember that the Americans have threatened to walk away from this conversation. I mean, earlier in the week, it seemed as though Donald Trump's patience with the entire process was expiring. Now, suddenly, everything appears to be back on, And, you know, if there is a face-to-face meeting with Putin, wherever it takes place, that's going to be a very dramatic moment, given that it was only, a few days ago that the United States was putting nuclear submarines on alert in the region as bellicose talk from former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, a close ally of Vladimir Putin, alarmed Washington.
And of course, must not be forgotten that Donald Trump promised to end this war 6 months ago on the first day of his presidency, which is very clearly a broken promise. Simon, one other story I want to ask you about today relates to Donald Trump's health secretary, RFK Jr., who has caused outrage and fear in the medical community today after cancelling £500 million in funding for vaccines for future diseases. Tell us more.
Yeah, £500 million in funding for future mRNA vaccines. And if we all cast our minds back to the COVID-19 pandemic, you will remember that those vaccines that were produced by Pfizer and Moderna and all the others were mRNA vaccines designed to elicit a response as people took them in a bid to head off the threat of COVID-19. Now RFK Jr., a known vaccine skeptic, is cancelling 22 separate projects funded by the federal government, including some that were being developed by Pfizer and Moderna to use the mRNA approach to battle flu and potentially other diseases as well. And in doing so, RFK Jr. indicated that his scepticism towards mRNA vaccines generally is growing, that he doesn't believe that they are necessarily effective or safe. Now, President Trump at the White House was asked about this by a reporter who said, well, hang on, what's going on here? Because you, Mr. President, were a pioneer in developing mRNA vaccines, because you claimed, you were the man. Had it not been for you in the White House, we wouldn't all have received those jabs for COVID-19. And Donald Trump indicated that he is hosting a meeting tomorrow at the White House with his health secretary and other stakeholders to review this decision by RFK Jr. So possible that his health secretary has taken a step too far.
Simon, great stuff as always. Thank you very much for coming on the programme. Simon Marks, LBC's Washington correspondent.